Hi, everybody, and welcome to ZTV Live. Today's Thursday, September 3rd, 2020. I'm Susan Mulligan-Fleischman, and I am so glad that you all are here tonight. If you would, please give a little wave or say hello and let us know that we sound okay, you can hear me and see me, and that everything is good in ZTV land. Tonight, it's the Virginia Amos Show, and Virginia's guest is Joan Honeyman, a master landscape architect who will be talking about sustainable gardening, things you can do around your own property. But before we bring Virginia and Joan on, I just have, as always, a couple of words from our sponsors. Tonight's episode of ZTV Live is sponsored in part by Murphy's Irish Pub on King Street in Old Town. Murphy's has outdoor seating, limited indoor seating, curbside pickup and carryout. Stop by for live music Thursday, Friday, and Saturday nights. Visit murphyspub.com. And by MB Bakery. Mary Beth's impeccably designed artisan goodies are now available on the go. You know you can trust a bakery that buys its butter by the ton. Visit mbbakeryonthego.com. And we have a little thunder in the background. And by Tizo Vietnamese Cuisine on Dow Avenue off Van Dorn. Tizo is your destination for tasty, nutritious, and authentic North Vietnamese food. Tizo offers healthy and affordable meals in a friendly and casual atmosphere. Visit tizorestaurants.com. If you'd like to sponsor ZTV Live or place ads on any of the Zebra Press newspaper or online digital products, let us know. Either send us a private message on Facebook or send us an email at ads@thezebrapress.com. That's ads@thezebrapress.com. Okay, so there is a storm in the area, thunderstorm, so we'll just keep that in mind as we continue on. Hopefully we'll all stay connected here. I'm going to go and bring Virginia on screen. Whoops, that's not Virginia. There's Virginia.
Hey,
Virginia,
Susan.
welcome to the Virginia Amos Show. Sorry about that.
Well, thank you.
You know,
Always
the
good to be here.
Yeah, and the beauty of live is that you never know who's going to show up. So anyway, great to see you, Virginia, as always.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good. Well, I will. Let's go ahead and introduce your guest, Joan Honeyman.
Yes, well, hello, Joan. Let's get that out of the way.
Joan, you're on camera. Hi, how are you?
Joan is down in the Mount Vernon area. Yeah, and I think that's where some of the thunder was coming from. So we'll just kind of move things.
If you heard me exclaim, that was me.
Yeah.
Thunder. So.
Yeah. Almost 30 years ago, when we bought our duplex in Delray, which was kind of carved out of a vacant lot that used to be a farm, we had a choice between the right side and the left side of the property. And we chose the right side only because there was a tree in the backyard, a large tree, and it was literally the only thing in that yard besides marine clay. Shortly after that, I had an opportunity to meet Joan, and we were both kind of involved in a fundraising project, and she was offering her skills as a landscape architect, and I took her up on it. And I have to say that although the plantings have changed, the hardscape that she designed for us 30 years ago is still in place. It is still giving us great joy. And I ran across the schematic the other day and I thought, oh my gosh, what a great person to have on to talk about gardening that has become so important to people in this age. So, Joan, welcome. I'm thrilled to have you on air with us.
Thank you, Virginia. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's one of my favorite things to talk about is gardening and having a plant chat. So I have to tell you all that Virginia invited me over to her house last week to just see what I could do for a refresher and some touch up. And I have to say that it's stunning. She's done so many cool things to it. Not only planting, but just beautiful little touches like a really cool arbor and some of the potted plants that she has. And there's just so much you can do to really create create a respite for yourselves, especially during these times when people want to get outside and want to be able to enjoy nature and get out of the house and take a break. So I'm really happy that you invited me on, and I hope that what we can talk about will help some people.
Well, good. Well, let's take that. Let's take that a little bit further. Gardening has become, when in the spring, particularly when people realized they were going to be inside and going to the grocery store wasn't feasible, there was literally a run on lumber because everybody was building raised beds for their vegetables. Now, I can't do vegetables because I have a shade garden, but I think it was that primal instinct to grow something. And to be able to say, this is mine, I did this. And I don't think it's any different vegetables and flowers. There's a huge sense of accomplishment, putting something in the ground and watching what happens.
I think that after everyone decided that they were tired of making sourdough bread, it was time to get outside. And that's an interesting point that you make, because for my whole life I've always loved to grow things. And even now, I've got a fairly good-sized garden, and a lot of it I can't eat myself, but I give it away. And it's such a pleasure to give people something that you've grown and that you've nurtured yourself. It's almost the same as cooking for people. It's almost an act of love, and I think that people really needed to be able to take their minds off of everything else that's been going on, and just be able to get down to the soil and really create something that is good for everybody.
Oh, I think you're absolutely right. And I think it's interesting too, because certainly when I started out, my mother was a great gardener. I knew nothing about gardening. And it's really been, it's been trial and error. And I think that has to be how people learn. I don't think that you necessarily, maybe you, Joan, but I don't think that people necessarily just have that instinctive, this is what you do. And the soils are so different, weather conditions, even the plants you choose. So it's not an exact science by any means.
No, it's not, but you should try it anyway. And you took the plunge, and you did a great job. And I think a lot of people are afraid that they have black thumbs. I know that my mother certainly is. But you just have to try it and just see what works for you. And there's so many tutorials on YouTube and so much information on the internet about how to grow things. For example, I grew some Delicata Squash this spring, and it's this beautiful, lovely. It's sort of a fall squash that you don't have to peel like the regular fall squashes. And it's got a really, really, really nice sweet flavor. But I grew them from seeds from a squash that I had last year. And I don't usually grow things from seed. I usually go to Home Depot or order plants, tomato plants and things like that. But this was such a it was just so wonderful to be able to grow these squash that I decided that I was going to try tomatoes. So I have this one tomato called Mortgage Lifter. So I went on the internet and I thought, well, how do I what do I do with tomato seeds are like this big? So I went on the internet and looked up how do you grow tomatoes from seed, and a whole explanation about how you take the pulp out, put the seeds in a jar, and then you have to let them ferment so it dissolves the gel around the seeds.
Oh my gosh.
And then you dry them out and then you save them. So I will let you know this time next year if my Mortgage Lifters actually worked. But
that's a great name.
Yeah. Because the tomatoes are like this big. They're huge.
They're big. Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you what they look like.
Yeah, but the point is that don't be scared. I mean, things may die, but that's just it's the circle of life basically. So there's nothing that costs that much where you're going to make that big of a mistake that it's going to be either devastating to your ego or to your wallet. So I would just encourage people to just go out and try things.
Well, and I will say that the other thing where you really pointed me in the right direction all those years ago was about planting perennials. Mm-hmm. And the only annuals I have in my garden at all are when I do some pots around the front steps, and I'll do some coleus and a few other things. But everything else in my garden is a perennial, and I admit to getting really frustrated when I go to a garden center and I see people loading up their carts with annuals, and I'm like, no, 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 no. You really don't want to be doing that.
Yeah.
You're spending too much money every year when you could just be creating this wonderful, this wonderful green space. And the perennials kind of takes us around to, I know you're very interested in sustainable gardening.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes a lot of different forms. I mean, sometimes I think people think it's all about organic gardening, and that's part of it. Perennials are part of a sustainable garden.
Yeah, I think that in my design practice, sustainable design is basically a baseline for everything that we do. And so the idea is to make sure that what you're planting sustains itself. So, annuals are going to die at the end of the year and you throw them out, basically. Perennials continue on and they multiply, and you can cut them in half and you can replant them. There are other aspects to sustainable gardening as far as water-wise gardening. How do you catch the water on your site and prevent erosion? How can you take a rain barrel from your gutters and use that for irrigation? So there's a lot of different techniques that you can use that will create a garden for you that in the long run will take much less work because it basically sustains itself. Susan, if you want to put up one of those pictures, put up one of the ones in the put up picture number 1. I think is a good one. Just to give you an example, give you all an example of a garden that I worked on in Falls Church that is completely sustainable. Is it?
Yep, it's up there. It's up there. No,
Okay.
you won't be able to see it. I'm sorry, but it is up there. It's Black Eyed Susans in the foreground, and there's beautiful.
Big lightning.
Oh, there it is. Yes, Black Eyed Susans in the foreground.
Is it the one with the bridge?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh,
So that is the little building in the back is the potting shed, but you walk over the bridge, and the bridge is actually on top of a big rain garden, which is collecting a bunch of water from the site and filtering it before it goes into the storm sewer. But the plantings that we used in that area are all native. They are low maintenance, and they don't take a whole lot of water. So there's another aspect to planting perennials, and that is to plant native perennials. A lot of people want to do native gardens, and they're very concerned about using all native plants. Where do you get them? How do I understand what to use? I mean, there's all sorts of tutorials about types of plants that you can use in a native situation. I usually use plants that are native meaning that they are adapted. They grow in this area, and they have originated in the area. The area meaning like the Mid-Atlantic region of the United States. I mean, there's different large ecosystems that we pull from, but I also use adaptive plants, and adaptive plants aren't necessarily native, which means that they are they're more localized, but they are tough and adaptable. So I think that that's really important. A lot of times when people are thinking about doing a rain garden or a perennial garden, and they look at how the plants, the perennials especially, look after they bloomed, a lot of times they look kind of raggedy and they just don't look that great. Well, when you use adaptives, which have perhaps more flowering interest or leaf interest, and mix the two together, then you have this combination which gives you a seasonal interest all year round.
That's a great point. And I think that's something that people don't necessarily think about, is that putting a garden together is kind of like it's putting a recipe together, and you have to figure out what works and what doesn't. I can grow epimedium without even trying. It just loves my garden, it loves my soil, and yet there are other plants that have not worked as well. And for me, it's been a matter of like taking out the ones that really aren't happy with me. Like heucheras and tiarella, they don't like my garden very much. So I don't want to burn them. I'd rather just have
Yeah.
them go someplace else and
That's
I'll
right.
grow things that are very happy there. But you mentioned something that also happened a lot this spring, and you were talking about how perennials multiply. Oh
Mhm.
my goodness, there are just a couple of really great online gardening groups in Delray, and people were like every day, well, I have this if somebody needs it, or I need this. And, plants were just swapping back and forth.
Right.
And I'm a huge fan of hostas.
Hmm.
And so whenever I can get a new hosta, I'm I'm delighted. And I finally found a way with a picture app that I can take a picture of the hosta and I can put the person's name on it. And
Okay.
so I now have that in my photo album
Oh,
to
that's great.
remember who gave me the
Yeah.
hosta.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is really nice because
I
it's
mean,
fun when
that's lovely. Yeah.
when they come over the next year and you can go, oh look, there's the hosta that you gave me.
And they're all proud because it looks great and they gave it to
They
you.
are.
I mean, that's another way that people can actually learn about planting is by like a plant exchange. So somebody's giving away, your hostas or epimediums, which you mentioned take dry shade, and
Right.
they're very particular. They don't like to be wet. So if you see that plant and somebody's giving it away and you really like it, then ask that person who's growing it. Well, what conditions does it take? 'Cause I don't know whether I'd be able to grow it or not. So. But basically, you have sun, you have shade, you've got wet condition, you have dry condition. So those are basically, the real things to think about. And then obviously there are, soil nuances and there are slope nuances and things like that. But basically, when you're looking to buy plants, whether they're perennials or ground covers, shrubs or trees, um, look to see if they take sun or shade. Do they take all day sun or partial shade or full shade? And if you stick to those basic rules, and also if they like wet feet or they like to be dry, um, and if you stick to those basic rules, which aren't that difficult, you can be fairly successful. That some of the plantings that you are going to be picking are going to work. And don't be afraid to move things around. Like you
Yeah.
were saying, if they don't look good, then well, maybe I planted this in the wrong place. Well, let me try, some other place. Um, it's such a joy to be able to be flexible with a very little investment, I think. Um,
My mother said that I moved more plants than anyone she'd ever known because
Virginia's garden is not that big, so that's why.
it's not a big garden, but I'm always testing out new places to plant something, or I think it might look better someplace else. Another thing, go ahead.
I was going to say the other thing is it doesn't always have to be about the flower either. It can be, as you're saying, in a shade garden, you don't get much flowering because flowers need sun. So you look to plant shape, leaf shape, and you look at plant leaf color, and you look more at weaving together a tapestry of form and color of leaves than you do a mixture of complementary colors of flowers in the sun. So it's just another way to think about gardening. If you're a shade garden, then you're not going to get a lot of flowers, but you will get some really interesting an interesting display of if you think about how leaves and colors of leaves go together, then you can get an interesting display in that way.
I'm so glad you brought that up because Susan, I don't know if you got that picture that I sent of my garden right at the end, but I love shades of green
Mhm.
and I love variegated leaves. And I'm actually just fine with having one or two things that bloom, have actual flowers, and then I have hostas and I have ferns and just things that are green and will stay green all summer, which is really in the dog days of August, it's cooling. The green
Right.
is cooling.
It is. It's cool, especially in a dark corner.
Yes.
The variegated plantings, especially the hostas, with white margins, or
Yes.
there's one called Summon Substance, which is kind of a chartreusey yellow. I mean,
Mm.
they really brighten up a dark area on your site. So, but we're really talking about more specific ways to design with plants. I just want everyone to know who is starting out. Certainly that, start out with some black-eyed Susans and some hostas if you don't have
Yeah.
deer, and just see how you do.
It is a great way. And then, save I learned quickly about specimen plants.
Uh-huh.
And you don't have to have a lot of specimen plants. They
Right.
get to they get to be kind of the show offs all by themselves.
And the
Well,
other
one,
thing, I was going to say, the other thing that I always recommend to my staff is to go to the nurseries and look at plants and see exactly what they look like, in situ, instead of looking at them in catalogs or online.
yes.
Because you really have to be able to see the texture. I mean, you have to feel them and see them. I think that's really important to be able to understand, how big they're going to get, and what they look like in combination. And I was just going to mention, Susan, if you want to put up a couple the pictures of the Ramsey house. I worked on the Ramsey house garden, which is next to the Alexandria Visitor Center, and that garden is basically a native plant garden. The Garden Club of Alexandria, it was the client and also the benefactor, and they are maintaining it. But when I met with them, they had a very strict requirement that the plantings in that garden were to be native and sustainable. So, for the most part, everything in the garden is a native plant. And so you can go and there's all season interest there. Even in the wintertime, we've got crepe myrtles, which have beautiful bark. So if you're interested in seeing something that's local, just go to Old Town to the visitor center, and it is open. You can just pop in and walk around. We have benches. We have the only cell phone charging station outside in the city of Alexandria in that garden. So definitely go and take a look.
Oh, I'll have to check that out. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about watering, because I think that's kind of one of the hardest things to learn as a gardener, is how to water and when to water, and how not to overwater, which is just as bad as underwatering.
Right. Watering is tricky because it depends on your soil, for one thing. As you know, you have clay soil, and that absorbs water differently than if you had a sandy soil, obviously. The rule of thumb is to give gardens an inch of water a week, and that can be over several days. But for example, in the weather that we had this summer, especially in July, I mean, I had sprinkler on every single day for a half an hour on my vegetable garden. The other plantings were mostly native in my yard, and so they
Hmm.
were low maintenance. They were drought tolerant, so they pretty much survived without supplemental water. I did put the sprinkler on every once in a while, but I think that if you want to see it, once plants start drooping and they start looking really dried out, then it's time to give them a little bit of water. But the rule of thumb, as I said, is an inch of water a week.
Okay. And does it matter what kind of sprinkler you're using?
No, as long as you're getting coverage.
Okay.
You're just going to have to move sprinklers around. I mean, you don't need an irrigation system necessarily. You can just get an oscillating sprinkler, or one of the rotor ones that just spins, and then put it on a timer. Get
Okay.
it at Home Depot, and time it for 25 minutes a day. Every day at 7 o'clock in the morning, and
Okay.
it's absolutely no work on your part. You just hook it up and let it go.
Okay. That's
Mhm.
good to know, because I somehow had this idea that there was a lot of water going into the atmosphere, as opposed to actually getting on the plants.
As
But
far as sprinklers, you mean?
yeah, yeah.
Well, no, I mean it does drip down. I mean,
Okay.
or I mean, if you don't have a sprinkler, I mean you can also use drip hose too. And drip hose is just a hose with holes in it that you snake through the garden.
Right.
And that's also a way to that's a good way to water also. I don't know whether I don't think the coverage is quite as good as
Okay.
with an oscillating sprinkler, but it's also no maintenance.
Okay.
I mean,
Um,
it didn't work.
I wanted to talk a little bit. I know that you also do commercial work,
Mhm.
and just as people have, glommed on to their own backyards this summer, I think that once we could actually get out of the house, kind of in phase 2 and now in phase 3, that a lot of people really became aware of how important green space is. And
Mhm.
maybe they poo-pooed it before and thought, well, why are you spending that money on just a big open space? But for quality of life and what it gives back to a community, green space can do so much.
Green space is absolutely imperative, I think, for the health and well-being of the community. And I was reading an article in the New York Times a couple days ago about how zoning regulations in the past have have distributed different socioeconomic people in cities, and you can tell by the amount of tree coverage,
Mhm.
where people live, and how much money basically they make. And in the lower socioeconomic areas, there just aren't as many trees, and
Yeah.
there's not as much open space, which is not equitable. And at this point, we have to start thinking equitably about how we design our public spaces. Um, uh, Not only in disadvantaged neighborhoods, but also making them accessible for everyone, universal design. So that's really important. And and the one of the important things is, especially in designing park space or small public spaces, is community engagement. So what we always do is make sure that the community is involved in design decisions. Whenever we're working on a park, we go in initially and have a meeting with the community and just ask them, what do you want to see in this park? What do you like to do? What do you think is important? And in a multi-generational community, there's a lot of different requests. And so then it's up to us as designers to figure out how do we accommodate all those needs in one place, and still have everyone get along and be able to use the space together. So I think that that's a really important part of looking at outdoor spaces, being able to accommodate the community and making sure that everyone has a say in what's going to be built.
Absolutely. And I think that the days of green space being just a large park with a vast amount of lawn expanse has changed dramatically, and in ways that I think are really interesting. I think of the park at Potomac Yard, which is a linear park.
Right.
And I've watched it since it was built, and the trees are starting to come in now, and I mean that park is packed
Yeah.
all the time, and I just think it is such an indicator of how desperate people are, or not desperate, but how desirous they are of a space where they can take their children, they can sit, but also how and I know this is it's a long range plan, but how, for instance, it would eventually connect into the park in Arlington. That I can't. The name escapes me, but it runs right up to the border of
Long Branch Park.
Long Branch
There
Park,
you go. Yeah.
which is, I think a lot of people don't know about it, and yet I think it's a fabulous park.
I didn't know about it until probably a year ago, and I know the design firm that designed it,
Yeah.
and it's beautiful. There's so much there, and it offers so much for so many different people, that you should all check it out if you have a chance. But I think that I think you're right there. We don't have the space anymore for doing big giant swaths of lawn.
Right.
And I think people want more programmed activities to a certain extent. So, we're always looking at creating dog parks for people, because people, especially in urban situations where there's no place for dogs to go, so you take them to a dog park. But the dog parks have dog activities and little mounds and all sorts of things for them to play with. And there's a big dog section and a little dog section. But then, also playgrounds. We do a lot of playgrounds. The district has been renovating most of their K through 12 schools, and so we've been working on a lot of schoolyards and doing playgrounds, and space for kids to get out and and have some free time. I would like to mention one thing that I'm doing, which is really interesting, and I'm just going to give, if Susan, if I may have a public service announcement here, but I am working on it's called the COVID-19 Outdoor Classroom Initiative, and it's broken into groups around the country. I'm one of the leaders in the Mid-Atlantic region, but we are going into schools and helping the school representatives look at their outdoor space on their school sites to figure out where they can possibly have space in areas for outdoor classrooms, just temporarily at first, because we want to get kids outside. We want to get kids to school, but they're going to have it's better for them to be outside instead of inside. So we have been working with some schools in Arlington and the district, and just helping teachers and the people that are the PTA and also the principals look at the schools, not only help them analyze the site, but also help them figure out how do we space kids, how many kids can comfortably fit in a space 6 feet apart, what kind of furniture do we need a shade structure, and all different things like that. And thinking that in the long term, these spaces could possibly turn into permanent outdoor classrooms, which we have done a lot in the district. Their educational specifications call for at least one outdoor classroom for each new school. But anyway, so it's a really interesting way of getting the schools to understand how they can actually use their schoolyards for outdoor classrooms. So that's another aspect of getting people outside.
That's great, and it makes me think that I think one thing that is coming out of this entire time period is a rethinking of how we use space. And whether it's office buildings that will be used for something else, high rises that'll be turned into schools, I think that outdoor space is going to fall into that category too. And that people who have been able to take advantage of it and who have kind of come to this new awareness of how important it is to get outside, I think will help redefine land use, and how we go about not just paying lip service to green space when it comes to development, but really seeing it as an integral part of development.
Right, and for the most part, the jurisdictions require a certain amount of green space when developers come in with their development plans. And so, but it's up to the designers to design smart, to design it smartly. And and that's the exciting part. And not only does it have to be green space on the ground, it can be green space on the roof too. We've done a lot of green roofs, a lot of vegetable farms on roofs. I have a wonderful group of young people that I know that have a business called Uptop Acres, and what they're doing is taking the roofs of new buildings that are being built, a lot of them in Navy Yard and like on H Street in DC, and in exchange for the taking care of the rooftop space, they are growing vegetables and selling them to restaurants and giving them away to community centers and offering, and then in the meantime offering community outreach and having vegetable growing classes, and it all started with the top of Oyamel restaurant, which is owned by, of course, Jose Andres.
Jose Andres, right.
His personal gardeners started this business, and they started growing these microgreens and herbs for Oyamel and other Jose Andres restaurants, and it just blossomed into this great business. And I don't know how many pounds of vegetables they grow every year, but it's a wonderful community service. So not only vegetable growing, but also just the new a lot of the new buildings, apartment buildings and condos that are being built, and office buildings, have a requirement for outdoor space on the roof, because why not? It takes more money, but it is such an amenity, and it gets people outside. I've seen dog parks on roofs, and outdoor exercise equipment, which we're doing a lot also. So I mean, it's just exploding, and I think you're right. Because now we have such an appreciation of being outside, because we've been inside so long, and it's so important to be outside. I think people are really getting it, and they're going to demand it. And I think that's a really good thing to raise people's awareness.
I think you're absolutely right. Two things come to mind: Ease Yoga, which is in Del Rey.
Mm-hmm.
They can't be in their studio, and they have green space, and so they've erected a tent, and they're doing outdoor yoga. Uh-huh. And also there's a new condominium complex that's going up in North Old Town called the Muse. Uh-huh. They're just barely breaking ground, but on the penthouse level there will be a fitness center with outdoor space. Mm-hmm. for exercising and for yoga classes. Yeah. And I just think it's such a smart idea, and it just is capturing our imagination in a whole different way, which is lovely.
Yeah, I agree. It's a way to be socially equitable too. I mean, we look in all different neighborhoods, and we involve all different communities. So I'm hoping that this movement has just really gained traction also. So we will continue that into the future.
And what is the name of that group again? Rooftop Gardeners?
Uptop Acres.
Uptop Acres.
Yeah.
It sounds like a Bruno Mars song. Uptop Acres. Yeah, I mean,
they hold yoga classes at the farms, and they do a lot of social. They do a lot of social media stuff, like come over and have a cocktail, and we'll make you hors d'oeuvres out of some of the fresh nasturtium blossoms that we've just grown. I mean, it's really they're great, but it's fun stuff.
Good. Susan, before we kind of wrap things up, do you have any more slides you can show us of some of Joan's work? It's so gorgeous. I want everybody to see it.
Yes, I have been showing some of them as we go. Oh, and also, Joan, I wanted to say that Mary Wadlin pinged in with a fun fact, breaking trivia news, that the only cell phone charging station that's outside in Alexandria is in the garden at the Ramsey house. Right, that's at the Alexandria Visitor Center. So that's a fun fact. So if anybody,
yeah.
Did you guys place that in there in your garden, or was that there already? You did?
Oh no, we did, and we were encouraging that the Ramsey house staff to have a couple of extra chargers, at the ready, so if people needed them, because not everybody walks around with a cord in their purse.
Right.
So.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Thank you for doing that. Yes, I have shown so many of these pictures. Let me show some other ones too. Now, you can't see me on the screen, but there are some beautiful ones here. Give me 1 second, because I can't walk and chew gum at the same time. But there's the Forest Hills, which is a view from above with all different greens going down a terraced hill, down a slope.
Yeah, I know which one that is. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
That was a residential project.
And the picture number 2 that we showed before was a picture of there's a big water well with a rock garden and almost like big grasses all around it.
Yeah, that's the same project that you showed the first picture with the bridge.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And so from the bridge, you go over, and the property was it was a double property, and one of the properties, the adjacent properties, was an actual the garden, and there was a giant pond on it. We reduced the pond in half, and then created a stream that originated from this fountain, this Core 10 fountain with 6-foot diameter that just spilled over onto rocks, and then drifted into the pond, and so all native plants, habitat, tons of birds.
It's beautiful.
Yeah,
it's absolutely
butterflies.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there was a playground that you did at the Ludlow Taylor Elementary School.
Yes, that's fun. That was a fun one because we used the next door was a River Smart Garden, which is a program that the district has for schools to be able to grow vegetables and also learn about water-wise techniques. And so we took from that the pollinator motif. So a lot of the play equipment has pollinator
design or a theme, a design or a theme.
I'm sorry, I'm getting tired.
No, that's okay.
and the surfacing is that we did these big Marimekko like flowers, and then we had these little playhouses that looked like beehives. So it kind of all went along with the pollinator.
Yeah, there's a great picture now of a whole bunch of the kids there playing on one of those little beehives. These are wonderful photographs.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no, you do beautiful work.
Thank you. It's fun. It's a fun profession, I have to say.
Yeah.
There they are. They're the kids. Well, Joan, thank you so much for being with us tonight. I just feel like we could keep talking about this for another hour.
Probably.
And maybe in the spring we'll come back and talk about getting ready for planting and soil and that kind of thing. But in the meantime, if people want to get hold of you, how can they do that?
You would go to our website, which is jordanhoneyman.com.
Okay.
And there is an information tab where you can ping us and if you have an inquiry. So that would be the best place.
Okay, great. We'll actually put something up.
I just put it in the comments. So hopefully, it just showed up there. So it's jordanhoneyman.com.
Yeah.
So
terrific.
Thank you both for inviting me. This was fun. I love to talk about design and I love to talk about plants. So this was perfect.
Well, I can't wait to get you back. I've just had all sorts of ideas now about what I want to do in the backyard.
Okay. Good. Well, the next, if we talk again, Virginia, you'll have to bring pictures of your garden in.
Well,
the other pictures.
At the last minute, I thought of a few of them, and then I couldn't get them to Susan fast enough. But we'll do some before and after things.
That's a good
next
idea.
time around.
So that's a great idea.
Yeah. So is pouring rain at your house?
I love before and after pictures. They're the most gratifying thing to look at, honestly.
So effective. It is.
Actually, I do have one of my mother digging in just marine clay, not a piece of grass, and we had just put in the raised beds, and we're trying to pretend to do something. But it is gratifying after all those years later.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you again. I'm glad you're at home and you don't have to get out in this weather. Susan, the same thing for you. It sounds like it's pouring rain down there. Or is it just sunny?
I think it's just passed us by. We had a horrible downpour and then it's passed us by. So it may be coming your way. I don't know.
Oh. Yeah, it's probably coming your way. And we didn't lose power, so that's always a good thing.
I know. That's what I've been thinking.
That is a good thing. All right. Well, we'll say good night and look forward to seeing you next week.
Thanks again.
Terrific.
Okay.
Sure. Thank you, Joan. Thank you, Virginia. We'll see you next week. Okay. Okay, well, that'll do it for us for ZTV Live tonight. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Virginia always has wonderful guests on, and tonight was no different. I know I learned a lot. I'm sure everybody did, too. We actually have a very exciting lineup for next week. On Monday, September 5th, music man Steve Hauk welcomes Cleve Francis to Living on Music. The very special musician got a unique start as a black country music singer in the 90s who chose a cardiologist career over music, but even so, he still plays sold-out gigs at the Birchmere. Of course, this year's appearance was canceled due to COVID. Super disappointing for Steve because he was supposed to join on the background vocals, but it's something to look forward to, I believe, in April 2021. That might be rescheduled. On Tuesday night, September 8th, our literary editor, Ralph Peluso, is back with Reading, Writing, and Ralph, and his guest is Rebecca Rose, author of Love, Politics, and Survival, Book 1. A fresh take on the family saga genre. So that'll be a great, Ralph always has great interviews. On Wednesday, September 9th, our newest host, Gina Cavallaro, is beginning with a bang, and she's interviewing Alexandria denizen and business owner Monty Durham. Monty's new salon opens next weekend, so tune in and hear all about it, as well as all of Monty's great stories. And then Thursday, on September 10th, Virginia Amos will be back, and her guest will be John Porter, the former head of Act for Alexandria, as well as a former principal of T.C. Williams. So that is a lot for next week. We're really looking forward to it. We hope that you'll join us here every night. Please feel free to join the conversation, and we look forward to having you tune in. So until then, enjoy. Tomorrow's Friday, TGIF, of course. Enjoy your weekend, and remember to be kind, and as much as you can, to be the good news in someone's life.